And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Life from the Inside Out with Kris. And we're here with you today, getting ready for another great episode. If you're new to the show, welcome. I'm glad you're here. And we're going to be doing some deep trance channeling shortly and jumping into our learning about our own internal wisdom. And I'm glad you're here with us. So I hope you enjoy the show. If you're back, thanks for being with us again. And I know I'm looking forward to exploring some exciting topics. So, Serge, how are you doing today?
I am pretty good. It's had a nice, fairly relaxing day. A nice sunny day here too, which has been kind of the exception since the beginning of the winter. So 3 days in a row is marvelous. The plants are loving it.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I'll have to warn the viewers if they see like the backdrop blowing in or something. We're in the midst of a windstorm with some gusts anywhere from 40 up to 60 miles an hour. So, so far so good, but hopefully it will be all right for the show. It's always interesting. Nice excuse to be inside, have an
Yes, it
introspective
is.
mood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I was mentioning to someone this morning that it's so sunny right now. Any kind of yard or garden that's facing south, you can see the little like tulip and hyacinth sprouts, and daffodils, which are some of the early little flowers coming up, and they're coming up out of the ground. So it's
Oh,
quite early. It doesn't mean we're out of winter, but
no,
we
no,
could
not at
still
this
get
time.
something. But it's very nice to see that somehow or other it's hurrying up.
Yeah. Well, spring's around the corner, and I wonder what Kris is going to have to say today. Been having some really interesting discussions in our seminars and some of the Sunday chats with the people that follow Kris closely, and yeah, some really interesting things coming up.
And I think he's got more.
I, I bet
Uh, how about that?
we don't have to cancel the show. Awesome.
Yeah, it still amazes me that after 40 years of doing this, um, he still comes up with new stuff and he finds new ways to present things he's talked about before.
Yeah,
Um, so that's a lot of stuff. So shall we get underway?
yeah. Feel free.
Now we trust that you are comfortable
Yes, comfortable.
indeed, and we thank you for your consideration.
Oh, thanks as well.
Please feel free to begin.
Well, one of the big topics of discussion has been about this idea of 100% responsibility for our reality creations. And Serge and I were talking before we got started. We I don't think that there's very many people that are at that. I'll call it a stage yet. And I'd like to hear more about that. How do we take 100% responsibility for our creations and get to that level of realization?
As the old saying goes, practice, practice, practice. Putting yourself in that particular frame of mind or zone or mindset does require a great deal of attention, of comprehension that you are the author of your existence, of your life. Every aspect of it does come under your jurisdiction, your governance, not someone else, not something else, not he, they, them, or she, they, them, but you. And it does require constant vigilance, being aware that your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings and emotions are all the key instruments. Your attitudes, your expectations are all part of the tools that you use to put together your experience, your perception. That may take one or more lifetime, but at least begin by acknowledging that even the so-called bad stuff, who you would so readily blame someone or something else, or, well, I accept it, except in this situation or that situation, that also does not work. So by cultivating that approach, first of all, you give yourself a tremendous amount of freedom. Look at it this way. Who is your master? Are you your own master, or is something or someone else your master? So looking at it from that particular angle can shift your perceptions even more into recognizing and accepting responsibility for the words, for the thoughts, for the ideas that all become your actions. Acknowledging that, working with it, dealing with that particular approach, applying it, then becomes the ultimate game changer. That is what is often mistakenly ignored. Let us put it to you this way. This is enlightenment. Enlightenment is not having some kind of supernatural power where you walk on clouds and raise the dead. Enlightenment is acknowledging that all aspects of your experience is created by you, and do so with a loving touch that adds an extra dimension to the process, knowing that your approach is from that loving place. No one, nothing, not the universe, no other being is out to get you, and neither are you out to get you. Your words, your actions, and so on and so forth are all the implements that you utilize. You, in your profession, have tools that you use. Other people have other kinds of tools they use in their professions and their careers. You use those to mold and shape your experience. As a individual, you use your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your attitudes, expectations, and so on. They are not a very long list, but they are extremely impactful and they work together. Acknowledging this then becomes the ground from which you rebuild your experience. You may, for your whole life, have assumed that, of course, it is the government. Of course, it is the scientists. Of course, it is the teachers. Of course, it is my spouse and my children, and so on and so forth. They are all responsible for the way I feel, for the way I am, for what I experience. And in other lingo, some people will say, well, the devil made me do it. I'm not responsible. It is a very nice scapegoat, but it doesn't hold water. Especially if, on the one hand, you claim that you understand that you create your own reality, and on the other side of your mouth, You are blaming another situation for your experience. It should be one or the other, not half here, half there, but one or the other. With the other, you tend to be victimized. Everything else and everyone else has some kind of power or mastery over you, or you have mastery over your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your mind, your behavior, your actions, and your reality. It is one or the other. You cannot choose. Well, here I will accept responsibility because I like this situation. And over here, I don't like this situation, therefore I'm not responsible for it. You cannot have it that way. It is one or the other. And as we suggested, the one where you recognize and acquiesce to the notion that you create every facet of your experience gives you tremendous empowerment. Because if a situation is not to your liking, you are not the victim of something else or another condition or circumstance. You set it up, you can undo it. On your keyboard, you have a delete key. You can delete a typo. Don't use whiteout on the screen, it doesn't work. Now, the funny thing with past experiences, even though you might acknowledge, it doesn't make the past experience go away or disappear. That will not happen. But it will give you an opportunity to put it in a different context, to reframe it in such a way that you see that your internal situation, your thoughts, ideas, and so on, culminated in actions that then resulted in the manifestation of the reality. That is extremely significant. When there is this kind of acknowledgement, when you begin to live and breathe the situation, when it becomes such a thing that your whole life is suddenly seen in that light, no one has the power to manipulate you. No one can say, well, they did something to me. You cannot say any longer that I am not responsible. They are responsible for the pain I have felt. You can then observe an interesting phenomenon. As suggested, the old experience does not disappear. It gets reframed. A new experience takes its place. It is not necessarily a displacement, but it is a reframing. When you grew up, you moved from one house to another. If your parents moved, you probably remember the house you lived in when you were a toddler or young man and so on. You might even remember the addresses. They have not disappeared. They are still there. But now you also know that you live in this house at this address. The others have not vanished. They are just not central to your story. In a similar way, you probably might remember some telephone numbers that you used to have years ago. Now you have a different phone number. The old phone number has not vanished. The new phone number is central to your story now. So things get shifted around. You acknowledge the past experiences. That is fine, but you are also quite certain that you live at this place now with this address, this phone number. Any other experiences in the same light may have happened in a way that they still are imprinted, but now you have a new set of experiences. They have not destroyed or made the others vanish. It has just become central to your experience. Whatever is going on in your life now is central. Changing internal structures, belief systems, does not eradicate the past. The past still exists, but is no longer having an influence upon you. Your present situation, the way you perceive it, is paramount to you, correct?
Yeah, I follow.
So the idea that some presently held belief systems that are perhaps negatively influencing you can also be put in a different context, reframed, such that a new belief system becomes central to your experience. You do not have to live according to something that happened 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 40 years ago. You live according to the experiences you have now. That is central to you. Having that understanding allows you to, first of all, know that what happened in the past stays in the past. It is still part of your history, but it is not necessarily something that need to influence you. You can determine the amount of influence you want. But the primary thing is that you can put it into a different context. You can allow yourself to literally live a different experience based on the context that you want. You can, for instance, suffer something that happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or more. Or you can shift your attention to what you want now, which is not to undergo the suffering. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you look at it in a different context, yet again, we mentioned this a few times in the past, that your entire spectrum of experiences is based upon suggestibility, suggestions, self-hypnosis. You hypnotize yourself in one way or another. It is to your advantage in understanding this that you want the best possible outcome. You would not, for instance, hypnotize yourself to have a crappy experience. No one specifically says, I will hypnotize myself to have the worst possible experience. It would usually be about a better outcome. When you, because you have played with artificial intelligence art, when you design the prompt, you are quite specific. You want, say, if you are wanting the AI to create a scenario, say a Hawaiian beach with flowers and water and so on, you would describe all the things you want to see, perhaps even in a specific manner, perhaps with sunrise or sunset, or full moon, or perhaps you want a top or above view. Whichever way you describe it, the AI will make every possible attempt to fulfill the prompt. If you want it in 3D, if you want a special tone to it, in a certain way, when you hypnotize yourselves, you are doing the same thing. You are inputting prompts into your mind. And that has to do with the way your attitudes and expectations all fall under the heading of your beliefs. Those become your prompts. So if you want a good outcome, one that is fulfilling, satisfying, enriching, adjust the prompt accordingly. If you notice an old prompt that just keeps repeating a rather negative image, then you have a choice. You can continue doing the same thing and get the same results, or you can decide, I will create a new prompt, one that will have a more satisfying outcome. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it seems like you might say programming the subconscious, or that might be one way that other people understand that.
Yes, it is the same with hypnosis. You give yourselves prompts that then function as the experience. You're telling yourself, I am a poor fellow. I suffer from lack of confidence. I am not attractive. I have these faults and so on and so forth. And it seems to you that this is very reasonable because it is your experience, without necessarily recognizing that you have been running the script, creating the prompts in your subconscious, programming your inner self that this is the experience that you want. So your mind will always try to give you what you focus upon. So the approach here in terms of hypnosis or a prompt is when you notice that something in your life seems unsavory or unsatisfactory. You are not stuck. This is not the way it will be forever. Just the same way if you make a typo in your word processor. You're not stuck with the typo. You can backspace. You can hit the delete key and rewrite the word properly. Nowadays, your word processors will even auto-suggest the correct spelling. But if you want to insist, no, I prefer the typo because it actually provides some interesting challenges in my life, then at least know that you are doing that. So the main idea is that, first of all of your experiences are the results of autosuggestion, the way you program your own subconscious mind. That is where all the stuff happens. This is the engine of creation, your mind. Once you grasp this and you begin to make the leaps of awareness necessary, you can have a completely different experience. Of course, it takes practice because most individuals are afraid to actually rely upon this process because they might have been told their whole lives that the mind is not to be trusted. It harbors some terrible things. Thank you, Mr. Freud. Once you begin to understand that this is the mechanism necessary to change your reality, then in this way, you have a better grasp of what reality is. And what reality is for most people is not really what reality is. Your perception. Everything is perception. That is where the self-hypnosis occurs. Another way to look at it, when you're having a conversation, it might be a little difficult, but you can, as you express, say, a particular concept or an idea to someone else, observe what is going on in your own mind. You will see that you are often picturing the situation, you are speaking the pictures. Does that make some sense to you?
Yeah, I follow. I noticed that.
If you notice this, notice what you do with self-talk, auto-suggestion. You paint the pictures in your mind. You are telling your mind what you want. So you want to have struggles in the workplace. You are having trouble at home. You are having some difficulties with the parents, some other struggle here. You are picturing the whole situation. And if you can stop yourself from picturing all of these situations that are not in your best interest and start picturing things that are in your best interest, things that are loving, things that are evolving with a sweet touch in your favor, then things will begin to be different. It is a extremely simple, basic recipe. What happens in the mind happens in reality. And fortunately for most human beings, the worst possible outcomes that you imagine do not ever